大家好，欢迎来到刚刚连线. Thank you so much for all the great support after the very first episode. Directly more than 200,000 views, and I especially liked the more than 2,000 written comments, which I love to translate and learn from. So let's see if I can do even better for you today. Today's topic: can the US force the EU into deglobalization to isolate China? What if they said, EU, make a choice, it's either them or it's us? Imagine you have two friends and all three of you get along okay. Then the other two pick a fight and woo you respectively for your support. You don't want to pick sides as you're not part of the fight. Then one party comes to you, figuratively puts a gun to your chest and says, it's either them or me. You're with me or you're against me. You must pick sides. From a German or French or EU standpoint, this topic is fast approaching, and I would argue it is already here. The old friend is the US, who is increasingly misbehaving, yet demanding loyalty. The other friend is China, more recent, but with a better trend. No 10-minute video can be exhaustive on such a topic, so let's connect three Chinese unique perspectives. Number one, is there any proof for such a gun to the chest? And what could that be? What does the common German citizen think? And three, my personal conclusion and outlook. Number one, examples what the US has been saying or doing. They say, we won't share military intelligence any longer if you include Huawei into your 5G network. We will freeze all accounts of companies participating in the construction of Nord Stream 2 natural gas pipeline from Russia to Germany. We sanction global companies who wish to uphold their contractual obligations with Iran from the time of the Iran nuclear deal, which was signed by China, France, Russia, United Kingdom, United States, plus Germany. In fact, within hours of taking office, the then ambassador to Germany, Richard Cornell, tweeted, and I quote, German companies doing business in Iran should wind down operations immediately. That is not the language of a diplomat, and reminded rather of a time when the US was an occupying force after World War II. President Trump, Secretary of State Pompeo, and other administration members like to give the impression that the whole world stands united against China. Caveat: the whole world that matters to the US, so obviously without Russia, North Korea, and Iran. But Europe is in the good camp and is certainly the most important ally they count on. So are we here to receive orders and accept strong arming tactics? What is our opinion? That brings me to chapter 2. All power originates with the people. So what do German citizens currently think? I found a very interesting and reputable source. It's the Körber Stiftung, that is a old private foundation with excellent national and global ties, very well respected. And they did a study called German Foreign Policy in Times of COVID-19. So they wanted to know if something had changed, and they regularly do these studies. They interviewed for that a representative sample of the German population. So let's dive into some of the results. 2/3 of Germans think that deglobalization would be bad. So that's the central premise of what the US is pushing. The export-oriented Germans, who have the most frontiers in Europe, clearly believe more in the benefits of global trade and multilateralism than the often isolationist Americans on their own continent, surrounded by two oceans, etc., which is understandable. As a consequence, Germans trust national governments and international organizations such as the World Health Organization most in the fight against COVID-19. Now, I come to Europe's performance later. They clearly distrust private companies for their economic motives. So how did the countries do in their opinion? The endless barrage of repeated criticism brought by the US against China and repeated in an endless loop has found its mark. More than 70% think more transparency could have helped. But hey, it is hard to argue with such a statement. Even my Chinese friends agree. Besides, would we have been faster? Evidence from Europe, the US, Brazil, and other countries suggests the contrary. So what is much more important is the overall impression that countries left over time. In terms of China, we see that overall the picture is rather balanced, even very, very similar to the one of the EU. Note the 25% improved opinion of China throughout the pandemic. That was really surprising to me, given the endless accusations we just discussed. Apparently, Germans saw through them and appreciated the disciplined lockdowns, even if some criticized them as too hard in the beginning. But then we saw them working, we saw the makeshift hospitals go up, we saw the nationwide effort to help Wuhan and Hubei, and most importantly, we are now reminded on a daily basis of the performance of the West. The EU has the home team advantage, and normally the incumbent wins in support in any crisis, since the incumbent can act. But we saw that initially it did not work. European solidarity was quickly forgotten. I just remind of the moment when Germany, my home country, withheld medical supplies from Italy during the very worst time there. Later, we saw the solidarity come back, with patients flown between the countries, doctors and equipment shared, and economic relief being enacted now. What is really striking, though, is that the US has lost enormously in prestige. 73% of Germans, almost 3/4, are negatively surprised by how Corona was handled. Now, a big part of that is a president who neglects the problem, sets a bad personal example, proposes to inject bleach or to swallow UV light sources, calls Corona a partisan hoax. Just last night in the rally suggested to reduce testing in order to avoid positive tests. Can't argue with that logic. But unfortunately ends up with a country leading the world only in the very sad statistics of infections and deaths, which was frankly not even an end in sight. But beyond the single person or administration, what really also disappoints is that in 2019 alone, the superpower US has spent 18% of GDP, that is $3.6 trillion, $3,600 billion on healthcare. That is more than twice per capita what Germany spends, yet we have, as of now, 3.5 times less deaths per capita. Instead, what we saw from the US were scenes like from a war movie, with nurses and doctors improvising personal protection equipment with trash bags and all that in the most important and biggest city of the most powerful country on the planet. something just does not fit in this picture. Is it the aspiration versus reality? Is it the wealth distribution? Whatever it is not seen in Germany as a desirable outcome for any society. Look at your role models. This leads to a really surprising conclusion of the study. As of May 2020, an almost identical percentage of Germans, 36%, believe close relations to China are the most important for Germany compared to 37%, basically same percentage, for the United States. Now, mind you, they only had these two choices, but that allows to really compare. And this is a completely new phenomenon. As I said, they do these studies frequently, and only 1 year earlier, in 2019, the US had more than twice the share of the votes, in fact 50% compared to 24% for China. So this brings me to my personal conclusion. Number 3. The dark corona clouds could have a silver lining. The EU might be the weakest of the three today, yet it could and should remain compatible and engaged with both, non-dogmatic, combining the best of all worlds. The US is clearly overestimating its attractiveness as an ally and continues to undermine its credit every day. What might possibly work with parts of the UK does not work with continental Europe. I can say that for France it is very similar. Unfortunately, as we all know, there's a war of images, narratives, fake news, etc. And that was the motivation for me to create my own channel, and that's why I explore reality wherever it might take me and trying to take you along. So now, you connect the pieces. 再见。